everyone. Welcome to the Legacy Cafe podcast with your host, Rob Lucy, author of the book, How Will You Be Remembered? The definitive guide to creating and sharing your life story. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and find yourself a seat in the Legacy Cafe. Here's Rob.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, hello, everyone. Is there something you'd love to have in your community that just isn't there? Would you like one of your legacies to enhance the lives in your community? But building it yourself is just, like eating an elephant. It's big and there's lots of moving parts and you'll never get it done on your own. I do a lot of speaking to foundations and I'm becoming a bit clearer on the value of community foundations. So I thought we'd find someone who knows what they are, how they work, and how they can help you build some really cool legacies that you'll be proud of now. Brad Ward is the Director of Community Philanthropy in the Council on Foundations. He's down in, I think, southern Indiana. Hello, Brad.
Hey, Rob. How you doing today?
I'm good. Let's start big. What is a community foundation and then how do they work?
Sure. I think the easiest way to sum this up is that they're just simply making good things happen at a very local level. They're truly embedded in communities across the world. You know, there's over 800 of them here in the U.S. There's several hundred there in Canada, and they cross all the way around the globe, creating opportunities for people to give in a variety of ways, offer a range of tools, that help make giving a bit easier, and to think critically about how you create, as you say, the legacy or the difference that you want to be associated with your name, your family, and your giving.
Yeah, so in my book and in what we've done in the cafe here, we've defined legacy as something you create that connects people, that enhances their lives. It could be one person to 5 million people. Connects people, enhances their lives, it makes you happier, and it will continue when you say goodnight finally. Is that true of a community foundation's work? Does it create that dynamic?
I think absolutely. They are in the business of building, long-term resources that support what matters locally. And after spending a decade of running a community foundation myself, what was most important to me was just connecting neighbors, connecting individuals who cared with causes that were important to the vitality of the community. So I wanted nonprofit leaders to be able to be connected with community leaders and community leaders to be able to connect it with, donors and givers and people that just wanted to find meaningful ways to give back. Because at the end of the day, we all couldn't be teachers and we couldn't build homes for the homeless or provide food in the food pantries or, read children, books at the library. Sometimes our careers took us in other directions that weren't as connected to the fabric of local community. And this is a way to get people back in touch with what matters in terms of providing sort of that personalized support. I've always believed that, there's reasons to connect with a community foundation over any other because they have the landscape view, that 30,000 foot elevation of what's going on in the community, in the nonprofit sector, in the charitable sector. And they're broad-based enough that they're not going to push an agenda on you. They are going to try to uncover and discover what's important to you. What is it about this community that you love? What is it about the community that you don't love and that you want to see changed? And I think it goes deeper than that because of their long-term, endowment building, perpetual building motto. They want to try to create resources that have a lasting effect. So it's kind of like planting the seed of the tree whose shade you'll never know. It's tiny all of our lives and then it's massive for future generations. And there's some correlations there to what a community foundation is ultimately trying to do in terms of connecting. And remember, it's a non-for-profit like anything else. It's just its institutional goal is to create perpetual assets that are there to last over time.
Now, you ran a foundation. I bet you've got some stories. I'm going to ask you about them, but let's back up a minute again. I haven't been to or someone listening has not been to talk to a community foundation. What's the benefit of me, the legacy builder, walking over to a community foundation and starting a relationship?
So I think often, people, I don't think people sit around trying to figure out how to give away their money, right? It's not the, but when you start to think about where your discretionary giving goes, and often we struggle with the fact is of the matter, it's buyer's remorse so many times when you buy the new vehicle and you drive it off the lot, or you go and pick up the big screen TV and you think, gosh, but you don't experience that when you give to charity. In fact, what I often hear time and time again is, I wish I could do more. And the Community Foundation is a unique player where you start to figure out, well, how do you do more? And at what point in your life does that more become reality? And so that's where estate planning really factors into this. And you're thinking about your legacy, you're thinking about your assets over time. You're thinking about what you can do today in your lifetime and how that might evolve and change as you grow. It's also a tool to help people think about, well, what really does matter to me? What do I want to see still thriving in this community in 10, 20, 50 years? What do I want to change for my grandchildren or great-grandchildren?
You got a story that tells me, that basically says this in real terms. Tell me about your time as running a community foundation. You can probably see some faces in your mind's eye, but what they did.
I remember a fabulous woman. She was a bookkeeper for the local community newspaper, and it wasn't any old average community newspaper. I mean, they were thriving and doing really well, and she was their bookkeeper all of her life, and she had lost her husband early on, and so she didn't have kids, and so she was charitable in her giving on a very small scale. It wouldn't have been anything that would have captured anyone's attention, but I thought of her as someone who I could tell was storing the dollars away and thinking big down the road. And what she ultimately did in creating her plans in her estate was what she wanted to leave behind as that bookkeeper. She wanted to create, what she thrived on was the new talent that showed up at the local newspaper to take photos or write stories as journalists. She wanted to create real, true, aspiring scholarships to give them the chance to go on and get those journalism degrees and hopefully land there in some type of a mentorship or internship program. She looked to us to not only administer the scholarships, because those are a little bit easier, those are a little bit more straightforward, on students that are going for scholarships, but how do we then go further and create opportunities to link them back to the local community, whether they are from the area or not, to introduce them to what was offered right there. And she did and it was a very, very sizable and unique gift that she left behind, that she had just created over her lifetime. And again, when she was alive, you just saw normal $25, $50 checks, so you wouldn't have expected what was to come in her estate.
She was able to enjoy the benefit of her funding new journalists. She saw it happen then?
She got to see she started implementing the mentor programs first. And so we did that one. She didn't get to see the bigger scholarships that ultimately went out, but she did create what we called the fellowship for the local community and give them the chance to have access to the work there. So she did see that in her lifetime. And then when she passed on through her estate plans, we saw the true extent of her legacy.
How about a legacy created while a person was alive and could really enjoy it and see it happen?
Yeah, so there was a farmer who, as he would have extenuating circumstances around crops or cattle, where he just couldn't utilize the full profits of these, because of the shifts, the massive shifts in those markets, he would use some of the surplus in many cases to provide a gift, and we would take the proceeds of that and we would actually reinvest those in playground improvements in all the unincorporated towns. So the incorporated towns had, public tax dollars to fund the playgrounds, but the unincorporated came through the hard work of civic groups and churchgoers and individuals. And so he wanted to try to provide a bit more sizable grant from time to time to allow them to make more impressive upgrades or improvements that were desperately needed. And he wanted it geared towards unincorporated towns. And so that was, a fun one for me, because as a farmer, they are, they're not cash rich by any means. They've got they sit on a lot of assets, and so you can't you can't realize the true benefit of those assets until much later. But he had found a way by utilizing particular appreciated assets or profits, through the gifting of either cattle or even feed and things like that. So it was unique, and it was certainly something new to me to figure out how we work with the local attorneys and the accountants to make these gifts work. But that's the complexity of community foundations. They can figure out a variety of assets that are not common among everyday charities. They work with real estate, they work with lifetime and estate gifts, and all kinds of variations of trusts and things like that.
So I can walk into a community foundation and I could have a real specific idea in my brain that I want to see this happening in my community. Will you guys help me get it done? Or I could walk in there with just saying, I've got some resources. What are you doing that could interest me and I can help make it happen?
There's lots of inspiration. Yeah, it's a two-way street, and it's a dialogue, and it's a conversation to get to know what they're really after. And sometimes then taking that very intimate community knowledge that a community foundation has and saying, are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? And so that you can start to connect the dots between things that you otherwise maybe aren't, you don't have the purview to see on a day-to-day basis that a community foundation does because of its unique grant-making role, its unique convening role, and its endowment building role. It sees the community from a different lens that not all of us have the advantage. So it certainly, I can remember a donor that came in wanting to create a scholarship in memory of his father. And ultimately, we realized that the size of the grant was very tough for it to really have a meaningful impact on a college kid because of the cost of education and books and things like that. And so we ended up taking that same award that fund would have created, and we put it in work at the local elementary school. And you would just make a grant to the third grade teachers, for example, and let them choose what is something that they wanted, but they didn't have the collective resources to get or the school budget to do. And so all of a sudden there was sort of this free play money that the teachers could say, we really need a science kit, or we really need a volume set of books or something like that. And it was only $300-400 grant, but it meant a lot to those teachers who were often digging into their own pockets. And now, instead of just helping one kid maybe buy a book for his college course, you were helping anywhere between 30 and 100 kids have access to something they might not have otherwise given.
Yeah, and you could turn on the brain of a 9-year-old kid who turns on to science and becomes the next black hole specialist.
You get it. You're seeing it. So there's sort of these strategic opportunities to invest in terms of how we would improve the quality of life for children and family and residents that the Community Foundation is looking for and trying to uncover. And if it can align it with your interests, your passions, they're going to help you do that.
Now, would it be unfair for me to say that Community Foundation is kind of a middleman? They're going to take the resources and discussion and my needs and place them where it's going to happen. Is that?
I would agree wholeheartedly. They're designed to build these endowed funds that benefit all aspects of the community today and tomorrow, and they're doing it by working with donors willing to invest back in their community in a way that is most effective, that you can create a personal legacy, but at the same time you can utilize that professional and personalized expertise of the Community Foundation to make wise choices for how those philanthropic dollars get put into use.
Just real briefly again, some people think of foundations, they might probably think of corporate foundations or family foundations. How briefly can we differentiate a community foundation from those other types?
A community foundation is owned and operated by and for the people. At the end of the day, it's a collection of funds by donors who set up small funds as small as $5,000-10,000 type funds, all the way up to very big donor gifts. And sometimes those smaller funds are created by a collection of family members coming together, or a charitable group investing because they want to create that endowment. But in the end, this is a non-for-profit community corporation. So unlike its foundation peers, it's not a singular donor. The donor is, it's not one source of money from either a corporate or a family. It's a broad base, it's a broad spectrum. And then the governing board is volunteers. It's people that you know and you trust in the community to oversee the stewardship of these dollars well into the future.
Have you seen a legacy created where it's kind of announced, or the ribbon is cut, and you've seen some emotion on those faces who helped make it happen, that said, "Man, this is now real, really real."
It's phenomenal when you get to that, especially when you sit, for example, with an entire family. Perhaps they're doing this to commemorate the loss of a loved one, or they're looking to do it in a way that supports sort of their generational giving. So they're connecting grandma with mom and dad, with the grandkids, and sort of creating that generational, connections. It certainly does. I'm trying to think of, a specific example, and I certainly believe that some of them were most passionate, when unfortunately they were turning a tragedy into something meaningful in that person's name and in that person's life. And some of those were very, very, let's just say, I mean, it was even, it even influenced me, just the emotion, the raw emotion of people trying to commemorate the life of a loved one, for example, in this passionate way. But I will say, Rob, it was even true for the folks who were just making plans. I mean, just for them to be thinking of their final act of how they wanted to see it different. These were giving people in their lifetime. They were making continued gifts to support the community on a day-to-day basis. But in their mind, it was nothing compared to what they were going to give after they took care of the kids, they took care of the grandkids, they took care of their church, whatever it may be. They had this little thing carved out. And it was just so powerful to see them think about, how do we take a lifetime of accumulating assets and how do we use it to some good in the very end? That was always powerful to me.
You've got all this experience in community foundations, but you're also now with a group called Council on Foundations, and I guess your focus is helping foundations grow, I guess. Is that kind of what the council does?
Yeah, the council serves all corporate, community, private, public, foundations, family foundations. But my niche is for the community foundations and trying to weave together the connective tissue so that they can learn from one another, they can borrow from one another. Because here's the thing, what works in my community, there's nothing that prevents it from working in another community, or it to be, sort of shifted and reshaped to work in another community. And that's inspiring stuff. And I'm not going to be stealing donors, for example, from another community. I'm going to be working with people who care about the community that I serve and the quality of life of those folks. And that's kind of the exciting thing. And I think the beauty of community foundations is how versatile they really are. They can tackle big issues, and they can just be serving the interests of their donors. They go on this pendulum swing very often. We took on big projects in our community, multi-million-dollar projects, and we worried about a few $100s going out the door for a particular issue or a particular cause, depending on the scale of the work. And it didn't matter. It was all just about trying to put more charitable dollars to work in the community.
Just as my accountant just said, "Hey, is this stuff tax deductible?"
It is all. That's kind of the cool thing about it is it maximizes the tax advantages, because now you're starting to look at the full spectrum of assets and how you use them to benefit you. I was, when you think about the estate side of things, the reality is the money, at least in the U.S., can only go three places. It can go to your heirs, it can go to charity, or it can go to the government. And a lot of times we can minimize the government tax burden, which only increases what your heirs get and what the community gets by using these charitable vehicles. And there's certain assets that are better to be used for different purposes. And working with professional advisors is something that community foundations do consistently to try to be as supportive as they can in making these things work to the benefit of the community and to the benefit of the family.
So here's my takeaway then from our conversation. So I could have an idea like $300 donations to a grade 3 science class, which could change the life of 2 or 3 kids forever. Or I could have a bigger idea for a monster park that the kids in the community need. I could walk in and say, I want to do one of these. Or I could walk into a community foundation and say, I don't know what I want to do. What do you guys got going that I can help? Is that the way I should look at it?
Yep. And sometimes you'll get people that just say, you know what, I just want to help things in the arts, but I don't know which charity is doing the best sort of work in improving the art scene, or I really care about, the animals. Well, there's all these different charities supporting, animal causes. Sometimes the community foundation can create field of interest funds that just support that field, whether it be, environment or supporting education or supporting the art. They can do that, and they can help find those, and it gives them the flexibility, if you think of it that way. And some of the greatest gifts that community foundations harbor are these, what we would think of as unrestricted. They're not designated for any particular cause, but they're for whatever the community might need down the road, things that we can't quite fathom today, but it gives the community foundation the flexibility to direct those grants in the highest needs of the future. And those are real opportunities to make a lasting gift in a great way.
Hey, Brad, we want to let the people in Legacy Cafe move forward on this. Have you got anything you could download and we can ship off to our listeners about what foundations are and how they run, and just kind of school me a bit more before I go visit my community foundation?
Yeah, and so I think that there are two things that I like. There's a website called communityfoundationatlas.org, and it is a tool that helps you find a community foundation anywhere in the world, and it has all kinds of profiles and facts and stories. And then, at my own organization, we have a community foundation locator, and if you just Google community foundation locator, you'll find it. Or if you go to cof.org, which is Council on Foundations, there's this great tool for community foundations in the United States. And as I said, there's 800 of them, so you can select by state and you can see. And when you're in places like Arkansas, there's only about 9 community foundations. But if you're in Florida, there's over 30 of them. And so it really can be geographically focused.
Terrific. Brad, thank you. That's great. I've always been curious about what community foundations do, and now with this broad overview, it'd be great to have some folks walking in saying, "Hey, I want to do something, and I know you guys can help."
And there's no pressure, Rob. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to bring the checkbook. Those first few conversations are just trying to figure it all out. So that's the beauty. That consider them a friend in this journey that you're hopefully on in creating your own legacy.
Terrific. Thank you, Brad. Most appreciated. We hope we know the folks at the Legacy Cafe will join this. We'll probably want to have a look at it, and you can learn a little bit more by going to legacycafe.org/COF. legacycafe.org/COF. Brad, thanks for the time. Much appreciated. And we hope we see a bump in community foundation use because of what you and I have done here.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. I'm Rob Lucy. This is the Legacy Cafe, and we'll see you again next time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Legacy Cafe podcast. We have lots of great conversations coming your way. And by the way, if you want us to send you reminders that a new podcast is ready for you, go to legacycafe.org to subscribe. That's legacycafe.org. Have a great day, and remember, the coffee and conversations are always hot at the Legacy Cafe.